And all men kill the thing they love. By all, let this be heard. Some do it with a bitter look, some with a flattering word. The coward does it with a kiss, and the brave man with a sword. This is the final stanza of Oscar Wilde's poem, The Ballad of Reading Gaol. It tells the story of the execution and burial of a man convicted for murdering his wife, told from the perspective of another prisoner. Colin Farrell sent this to showrunner Lauren LaFranc. As the first line I read tells you, it's about how every man kills the thing that he loves. And this, to Colin, was ultimately the story of Oz Cobb in this series. It's also where the title from episode 8 is derived from, as a great or little thing is also a line from the poem. It's always a bittersweet moment when a great story reaches its conclusion. You feel both relief and satisfaction that it ended well, but also sadness that this is the end. And in the case of the Penguin, I'm very glad that this show was able to maintain the stellar quality it began with. As I said in my previous videos on the show, one of the elements that makes this show as compelling as it has been was its ambiguous stance on Oz. Throughout the show, he has been a web of contradictions, with moments of true evil shining through, as well as moments where he seemed to have some humanity to him, like his seemingly genuine moments of care, such as when he's proud of Vic in episode 3, or when he comforts him after Vic has his first kill in episode 6. But in this final episode, there can be no doubt anymore that Oz is, and always was, a monster. And what makes this work is that it's all set up so brilliantly. So in this video, I'm going to explore how Oz's character arc is set up and paid off in the series finale, as well as touching on some of the other elements of the show more broadly. Oz is framed through his interactions with others, most notably Sophia Falcone, Vic, and his mother Frances, and how he interacts with them reveals a lot about the character and the character arc he undergoes as this show progresses. Let's start with Frances in episode 8, as there's some very interesting elements to unpack there. The flashback sequences episode 8 opens with provide a lot more context than the flashbacks of episode 7. The episode 7 flashbacks are framed from the perspective of a young Oz, and given we know Oz to have some serious delusions, whilst the events they depict are true, they're biased towards his perspective on the past. For instance, we only see examples of his brothers diverting their mother's attention away from him, something Oz perceives negatively. He also seems to remember his brothers as cruel towards him, but even then, we are shown that much of it is what Oz takes from scenarios rather than what is actually the case, such as him perceiving his brothers hiding somewhere in the tunnels that they know Oz won't be able to get to.
I found you! Shouldn't have to flash this stupid light in your faces for it to count.
You know the rules, Oz.
Fine. Hurry up! Come on, Oz.
Hey, Oz, you okay?
Screw this!
Oz!
Screw you guys!
Oz, what's going on?
You know it's hard for me to get down it!
I'm sorry, Oz. We'll start over, all right?
Likewise, the scene of Oz at the jazz club with his mother is depicted from what Oz can remember. It's the parts that are most significant to Oz from that night, and how it's framed in episode 7 suggests that Frances puts the pressure onto Oz to give her the life that she always wanted, suggesting that she is responsible for how he evolves, which perhaps evokes more sympathy for Oz from the audience, feeling that he's been pushed into this. However, episode 8 flips this all on its head through the flashback sequence being now told from the perspective of Frances, revealing to us that not only has she always known that Oz is responsible for the death of his brothers, but also that she was so close to handing him over to Rex Calabrese to be killed. What's all the more ironic about this reveal is that Oz idolizes Rex, both as a kid and even to the present day, with him expressing his desire to be like Rex in his discussion with Alberto Falcone in episode 1.
When I was a kid, I was a gangster. Real old school type. Rex Calabrese. He was a big deal. At least in my neighborhood. Can you imagine? To be remembered like that? Revered.
What is this? You want me to be like some small-time asshole?
Nah, that ain't what.
For what? Would that make it easier for you to take what's mine? Or is this you? What you want?
No.
Holy shit, it is.
Little did Oz know that he was so close to being killed by him. Moreover, despite Oz not even being aware of it, this scene acts as an early example of him being able to talk his way out of situations, as ultimately, it's the promises he makes to his mother in the jazz club that night that keep him alive. So already, at such a young age, we're seeing elements of Oz forming which become cornerstones of his character later on. There are a number of explicit parallels made across the show. In episode 7, he abandons his men down in the tunnels when Sofia's bomb is about to go off, much like how he abandons his brothers there in those very same tunnels years prior. He talks his way out of his mother sending him to his death, much like how he's able to talk his way out of situations in the present day, such as escaping Falcone's house in episode 2, or even talking people into following him, such as the other gangs in episode 6, or getting the GCPD to help take away Sofia Falcone via pulling strings by making a deal with Councilman Sebastian Hardy. What these flashbacks do then is pull back the curtain on Oz's past, revealing how he's always had very villainous traits from a very early age, which inspires the audience to distrust him as we're given more examples of Oz's deceptions. Flashbacks of episodes 7 and 8 demonstrate a disconnect of truth between Oz and his mother, and in episode 8, Sofia aims to bring this to light as a way of destroying Oz. After realizing how much of his identity is built off of his mother's approval, she thinks that if she can get him to admit the murder of his brothers, that this will destroy him. But this moment doesn't go as planned for her, as Oz refuses to cave in, despite his mother being made to feel pain in this moment. You can see the visible shock in Kristen Miliotti's performance in this moment, when Sofia realizes that Oz will truly do anything to save himself.
You would have let me cut it off. Huh. You would have let me do it. Because you don't care about her.
Fuck you.
You don't. Not enough. Not like you say. You don't feel a fucking thing.
It ends up being his mother who breaks first, revealing to Oz that she always knew the truth.
I know what you did to Jack and Betty. I always known. Oswald. I had enough to give Oswald. I had enough to give all three of you. You didn't have to leave him down there. You didn't have to take him from me. They were my babies. My world. Your brothers.
It's an intense scene performed brilliantly by everyone in it, especially Deirdre O'Connell as Frances and Colin Farrell as Oz. Her stabbing of Oz is her final act where she has any control over herself before she succumbs to her stroke. So really, whilst Oz keeps her around in a vegetative state afterwards, her final act of her own is her stabbing her own child out of rage and grief for what he did to her other two, showcasing how much she hates him. This reduces down the sense of victory Oz feels once he's reached his aspirations, as whilst his mother does get to look out over the Gotham skyline from a fancy penthouse, as she'd always wanted to, she's completely lost herself to her illness in the process. The fact that Oz keeps her around also betrays the promise he made to her in episode 6.
I need you to help me. You gotta help me die. Say you'll do it. You mean it. Because you love me.
All right. I'll do it.
What makes this particular scene so poignant is that it's performed so that we clearly know that she's in a moment where she's fully conscious of what's happening to her and aware that she's unwell, something which isn't often the case throughout the show. So we know that this is what she genuinely wants. Oz makes that promise to her and then fails to deliver on it out of his own selfishness. This again acts as a way of showcasing how Oz is only ever looking out for himself and his own desires. This leads neatly onto his use of Eve in the last episode. In episode 6, the exchange between Sophia and Eve shows us how Eve is always pretending to be someone else for her clients. And for Oz, it's all about inflating his ego. Episode 8 takes this to the next level, as Oz has her dress up as his own mother at the end, even wearing the same dress we've seen Frances wear throughout the show. It's a very dark and twisted moment, which reveals the slightly incestuous elements of Oz's dynamic with his mother, given that Eve is also his lover. There's also some sense of tragedy in this moment as well. We know Eve is pretending, she's paid to be there, and Oz is aware of this too. And yet her pretending to be his mother and giving him her false approval of him helps comfort Oz, showing how he's still chained to that desire for approval, which he can now never get in a way which isn't artificial. It links back in with that Oscar Wilde quote this video began with: "All men kill the thing they love." Slowly, Oz killed his mother, starting by devastating her through killing his brothers, and all the years that followed where he failed to give her what she promised, with his actions ultimately leading to her capture, and the stress of which was likely a leading cause in her stroke. Oz loves his mother deeply, and it was that love and desire for her approval which killed her in the end. And even though her heart still currently beats, she's practically dead in every other way by the end of the show. Speaking of Oz killing family, poor Vic, this to me was the most chilling moment in the episode, even more so than the scene in the old jazz club. It was very well written, with it starting out as what feels like a moment of victory for both of them, only for the sinister score to slowly kick in, giving you the feeling that Oz is about to do something awful. And then he ultimately strangles Vic in a tragic and horrifying turn of events. This scene also parallels the scene in episode 1, where Vic and Oz meet for the first time, and Vic pleads for his life.
Please, please, please. Don't, okay, please. Please. Please.
I can't have that shit. I can't.
Please.
It's too much.
Please.
Too fucking much.
It shows how this story has come full circle, and that ultimately, Vic should have walked away whilst he had the chance in episode 3. Vic is arguably the character that throughout the show we see Oz be the most decent and caring to. His interactions with Vic help to humanize Oz. So in killing Vic, it shows how inhumane Oz is, as it takes away any sense of authenticity to Oz's actions in the earlier episodes where he seemingly cares, because it ultimately reveals Oz to be a master manipulator and a monster at heart. I like the subtle moment where he holds onto Vic's driving license, almost as if you expect him to keep it as a token of his appreciation for what Vic has done for him. But he ultimately then discards it into the river, much like how he does with everything and everyone once they've outlived their ability to help Oz. Oz's cruelty is further emphasized through what he does to Sophia in the end. Killing her would have been the kinder option in this scenario, as he understands just how much Arkham broke her. So in sending her back there, he places her in the place she hates most. The scene that led up to this was excellent too. Having Oz drive her to what she thinks is her death is genius, as it mirrors the setup of the two of them in the past, where Oz was nothing more than her driver. The power dynamic reverses completely by the end. Rather than her telling Oz where to drive, Oz is now driving her to where he wants her to be. Sophia's loss at the end is only emphasized through her celebrations of her victories beforehand. Her burning down of her family home and leaving Gotham acts as her escape to a new life, and she gets so close to it as well, standing by the hangar with her plane to freedom next to her, and yet Oz ultimately outsmarts her in the end. The show succeeds in being its own individual self-contained story, as well as setting up some threads for the next chapter of this story, this being the Batman Part 2, set to release in October 2026. That film is heavily rumoured to be set during the winter and possibly around Christmas time, and in later episodes of The Penguin, we see the weather of Gotham change to be more wintry, with lots of snow. We also see the cinematography shift to incorporate more blues in the colour palette. The show starts out by mirroring the cinematography of the Batman, with lots of oranges and reds dominating the colour palette, but by the end it shifts to blue, which I suspect will be what the aesthetic of the Batman Part 2 will also adopt. It's a subtle detail, but I appreciate it as it demonstrates a progression of the weather in Gotham and how the lighting changes season by season. The finale also sets up some intriguing story threads that will likely be explored in the Batman Part 2. For instance, Selina Kyle reaching out to Sophia, telling her that they're half-sisters, which they are, as the Batman reveals Selina's mother, Maria Kyle, was murdered by Carmine Falcone in the same way as Sophia's mother and the other victims were.
When I was 7, my mother was murdered. Strangled. Never found out who. Probably some creep from the club.
I'll be interested to see where this leads in the next chapter of the story, and the effect of a potential alliance between the two of them. Also, it's been circulating online recently that the character of Dr. Julian Rush may be this universe's interpretation of Scarecrow, as in the background of his office can be found what looks to be the Scarecrow mask and gauntlet famous from the Batman mythology. This could be nothing more than a subtle little reference, or it could turn out to be significant for the future films, but it's an interesting detail to note. The Scarecrow character normally goes by the name of Dr. Jonathan Crane, but movies and shows are often known to tweak around with the lore and character names, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if this turns out to be this version of the Scarecrow, especially given he works at Arkham Asylum. The explosion caused by Sophia at the end of episode 7 will have likely come to the attention of the Batman, as will the news of the death of the rest of the Falcone family and Salvatore Maroni. The final shot of the final episode is a perfect segue into the Batman Part 2. By showing the bat signal light up in the Gotham sky, it lets both the viewer and the Batman know that he's needed for what comes next. Overall, then, The Penguin has been a remarkably good show, which succeeds in both setting up the next chapter of the Batman, as well as standing on its own as an excellent piece of storytelling media. And if you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. And if you're looking for more analysis and reviews of movies and shows, then please like and subscribe for more. Thank you.